Great agenda here today for everyone, and I will apologize in advance. We have a number of people, though, that will be kind of coming and going. So, one, to our presenters, please do not take it personally. There's just a lot happening over at the Capitol, and we're all trying to divide and conquer. But two, we also, I understand, have a number of trustees that are going to be listening via the web cast of this. So there's other people out there. But we hopefully will have a really good interactive session here today. I think one of the reasons we wanted to have this workshop was because the world is changing and is, rapidly, and this is a very important, distance learning is an important component of everything that is happening on our campuses. And yet we really don't all have a common foundation to have the dialogue of definitions and what's happening. We don't necessarily have the same background of understanding the different models. And each of our institutions, as surprising as it may be, are taking very different paths as to how they deal with distance learning. And so what we wanted to do by having trustees participate at this level and by having the Board of Governors be part of this workshop is to really try to have a great dialogue, make sure we get some good common understanding, talk about the public policy implications of distance learning, but to really have trustees interact with us before we even write word one of any kind of policy. We don't really have a policy on distance learning as an SUS right now. That may be the right answer. I just think it's important that that be a conscious decision, not a no one was paying attention and the world kind of changed on us. So we have got a great team of speakers that are going to be here with us today. I can't tell you how much time and effort. I asked a leading group of people within our system, and every institution has great distance learning people, but we kind of had to pull a working group together that we could be practical and get together on calls. And so for probably 6 months plus now, this team has been meeting on calls and helping pull together presentations. We've been circulating it with the other distance learning specialists at each of the institutions. So I think we have a well-rounded platform for you. To all the presidents that are here that have loaned, President Benz and President Hitt, that have loaned their team to us, I thank you very much for doing so, because I know it's been a lot of time, but I hope that it'll be very productive. But I think kind of one of the most important things is that we do want this to be interactive. We've got kind of 4 different segments to our discussion today. Kind of first is geared around providing a common platform and basis of our discussion, terminology, things of that nature. Then we're going to be determining, policies and things that are there and understanding what's happening in the rest of the world. So after each speaker, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Please do, but then we'll also have some time for dialogue at the end that can cover something from presentation 1 to 4. And so just know you've got lots of opportunities for input here. So with that, I'd like to call Richard up. And Richard Stevens, I think most of us know on our staff, he's always kind of behind the scenes helping us pull together lots of information as our Director of Academic and Student Affairs. His primary responsibility has been managing the academic program approval and articulation process, but he's also served since 1998 as our primary representative and coordinator for the distance educational, instructional, technology, and other e-learning related initiatives. I think it's for board members, we see them when they're helping us with our specific thing, but we kind of sometimes don't get to know what great expertise we have on so many other areas. And this is an area where Richard really is an expert, and he's been very helpful pulling this together. He also serves as the liaison with the Florida Distance Learning Consortium, the Southern Regional Education Board, Educational Technology Cooperative, Electronic Campus, and Distance Learning Policy Laboratory. So Richard, kick us off, please.
Thank you, Governor Duncan. Can everyone hear me okay? Very good. Well, what I'd like to do is really kind of provide a baseline of information that will be built upon by the other presenters. And I'm going to not go into a great deal of detail about some of the things I'll put up there unless, of course, you have questions about the actual data. And the reason I'm doing that is because, see, when it gets down to some of the state level policy, or beyond the state level policy, to some of the regional issues and the national issues, we have someone here that's much more versed in that than I am. And also, when it gets down to the campus level and what's actually happening there, we certainly have two recognized experts in our system that will deal with that. One of the first things I want to do is to kind of talk about what is distance learning or what is e-learning. How is it defined? And in talking with different groups, we often find that people come at this concept from different directions. And one person's distance learning is not necessarily another person's distance learning. And some people don't like to use the word distance learning at all because so many people are not really all that distance from their college. The other thing that you'll hear quite frequently is the term e-learning. So what you have here is really kind of a confusion in the terminology that occurs in normal discourse between people who are trying to talk about educational technology and basically e-learning. And what you hear often is things like distance learning, e-learning, online learning, off-campus, mixed modality, hybrid, etc. The thing to remember that you're referring in all cases to actually instructional delivery methods. And they're often used interchangeably, and they can be defined along a continuum of technology use or by space utilization. There have been attempts to define them by proximity of instructor and student. One of the things that I find that confuses a lot of people is when you start referring to distance learning programs, and what is a distance learning program at your institution. And in fact, in most cases within the state university system and other institutions as well that I have seen, and the program itself, the academic program, is still headquartered within the department, within the curriculum of the college or the department, the university. And what happens over a period of time in most cases is you build out the number of courses that are available through distance education or e-learning until you actually have an opportunity to complete the majority of your program at a distance or, in some cases, the entire program. Now, having said that, there are a few distance learning programs in our system that were originally designed and structured to be just that. But for the most part, it's been an evolution from classroom to an online format. And this whole thing with common definitions is problematic for us on a number of levels. It really is, you'll see a lot of data presented to you here today, and if you're really sharp, you'll pick up on the fact that some of it seems to be contradictory. And one of the reasons that this happens is that there's really no common definition nationally for distance learning or e-learning. And so this makes it very difficult to measure the scope of e-learning. It makes it very difficult to make meaningful comparisons across institutions, across states, and even across at the program level within institutions sometimes. And certainly when you get to a situation like with this board, it makes it even more difficult to have meaningful policy discussions. But recognizing this, back in 2009, or actually 2008 when it was created, the legislature, Florida legislature, convened or required that actually chancellors convene the Florida Distance Learning Task Force. And that task force met for a year, looked at a whole bunch of different issues that were associated with distance and e-learning. And what they did then is come up with a report back to the two boards, this particular board, State Board of Education, and also the legislature and the governor's office. And one of the things they were tasked with doing was actually defining distance learning for the purpose of establishing a distance learning fee for the universities. And the decision at that time then was not necessarily a uniform decision. There were some people who disagreed with it, but the majority came up with the term of 80% of the direct instruction is delivered utilizing some form of technology. And this then gave the legislature something to sink their teeth in to say, okay, these are the types of courses that you can actually charge a distance learning fee or a bolt-on fee, if you will, for things that are adding costs to your delivery of instruction through distance ed. And it was adopted in the statutes in 2009. And one of the things that came out of that, although it was not adopted in the statute, was there was also created a kind of a state definition for hybrid and blended courses. And you'll hear more about this concept of hybrid and blended. But basically, what you're talking about here are courses that incorporate combination of classroom-type lecture and also online or other types of electronic instruction. And this definition of 50 to 79% that you see before you on the slide was then adopted into the State University system data dictionary. And in the future, we will start to see some shifting of the numbers I'll show you in a bit, that where, courses that are not meeting the 80% will suddenly start showing up in the hybrid blended area. And I'm expecting to see a considerable shift in some of our data as a result of that. But it was a decision that was made by actually this board in response to the task force report. So, we're going to shift over and stop calling it distance learning because, that was kind of an agreed upon decision by the presentation team, and because it goes beyond the whole concept of distance, and we'll start talking about them from the e-learning perspective, because it does include courses that be completed totally at a distance, courses that require some presence on campus, courses that are, maybe 50-50 split, or even different variations of that. And in all cases, what you have here is a combination of people and things. And you have, of course, as always, the students and the instructors, but in some cases where you're scaling out the courses, you'll have mentors, coaches, or whatever you choose to call them, who assist the instructor in dealing with individual individual student problems, and helping the students to be able to navigate the course software, and helping them also sometimes to even navigate the instructional information. You always have student technical support, which has to be 24/7. You generally have a design team, course management software, etc., and all the things you see here. So, one of the questions that we are often asked is, does it cost more or does it cost less? And in fact, there is kind of two opposing cost assumptions associated with e-learning and distance learning. And one group might say it costs less because you can teach more students without adding faculty or classroom space. And there certainly is some cost abatement related to facilities. You'll see later on that when I talk about the numbers of students that are being served through distance learning, that those are students who are not necessarily sitting in a classroom somewhere. So there's a certain level of cost abatement associated with that. With the hybrid courses, there's also some cost abatement associated with scheduling the courses together. You can schedule two of them into the same classroom space for the semester if you do it correctly, because students will be spending part of their time in classroom and part of their time online. One thing that I hear frequently is that the student-faculty ratios can be where basically you can just keep adding students to a distance learning course because there's no classroom limitation to it. But you still have to deal with the student-faculty ratios, and they cannot expand indefinitely. And there's often more one-on-one interaction between the student and the faculty due to the fact that there's email and other things associated with the instruction. And certainly the use of mentors and external vendors provides scalability in these courses, and there again, that provides a little bit of cost savings, but you have to be careful to balance that against your other curriculum requirements to maintain your quality. And one point that I think I made to someone who asked me was, well, what about the facility costs? And then the fact is that if you're building a building on campus, your facility costs are amortized across decades of students. And with a lot of your online courses and distance learning, what you're really looking at is your personnel costs being one of the driving factors, and those are recurring costs. Another group would say it costs more because you increase the development and support costs on a recurring basis, just what I mentioned. And in fact, there is the course development and maintenance is a team effort. You do have your 24/7 services. You do have to update and maintain your software and hardware that helps you to deliver the courses. And some of these recurring costs are certainly subject to inflation. And you still need facilities for faculty, staff, and equipment. So, there's still some facility costs associated with it. Then, if you look at the characteristics of the students within our system And this has seemed to have played out actually with every study that I've seen that looked at the characteristics of e-learning students, is that, typically they're kind of like the traditional on-campus degree-seeking students. In fact, 90% of the students in the state university system who take a one-distance learning class or e-learning class also take classes on campus through the traditional lecture mode. And this has been the case ever since I've been involved with it, since 1998. It's hovered around 85 to 92 or 93%. One thing it does do, though, is you can reach out to adult first-time learners. And we do see, as I will show you in a minute, that a lot of times those that are taking only e-learning courses or distance learning courses are actually older students who have obligations that prevent them from making the trip to campus on a regular basis. And of course, professional seeking career advancement are courses for just-in-time learning. You'll see this pop up in some of the slides I'll show you within the number of certificate programs. Amazing growth in the number of certificates that are offered and awarded through e-learning in our system over the past few years. And you also, when I look at the actual student data, I find a lot of non-degree seeking students who are obviously doing it just for personal enrichment. And what do they get out of it? And why e-learning in a way for the students? Well, when you stop to think about it, when you go into a distance learning class, your skills that you're going to develop, would be being able to use technology better, to be able to conduct effective internet research, online communication skills, online collaboration, and basically developing a real comfort with virtual learning and working within virtual environments. And what this does is it really helps to prepare the students when they graduate become lifelong learners, and also I think to function better in the business world of today as professionals, where you are engaged in these types of activities all the time. And I know certainly I am, so I'm assuming that most others are. But where are we at within the system? And the data that we currently have available was for fall 2009, 2010. And we had, within our system, 172,000 students enrolled in at least one distance learning course. That's 54% of the total head count for fall 2009. And there, along the second line, you'll see that, that it's predominantly, a mix similar to what we see across all of our demographically against all our students. 60% female, 40% male. African American coming in at 11.25%, just a little lower than the system average. And one thing that I think is very important to point out is that within the system we had 26,000 plus students enrolled in only distance learning courses. That means that the only courses they took over that year were distance learning courses. And I gave this presentation, a similar presentation last year, and I was referring to the fact, well, that the number then was equivalent to UNF. And right now you would be looking at a number of students enrolled who are equivalent in number to the enrollment at Florida Atlantic University. And you see there again the breakdown of graduate and those that appear to be non-degree and et cetera. It's an important thing I think to keep in mind is just how many students that the system is serving through online education at a distance. And when you start thinking about the associated costs, that in fact you are going to see I think some cost abatement for the system in the fact that you're serving this number of students without having to actually create real space for them. More e-learning by the numbers, just to show you a quick breakdown of the student head count by university. One point that I want to make as we go through these slides is that not all the universities have made the same level of investment in e-learning, and for different various reasons. Some of them mission, some of them just looking at doing something differently. I know that early on that the University of Central Florida had made a commitment to start to expand its online offerings and education. Excuse me, its offerings through technology, and went through a period of time to build out their faculty to be able to do that. And I think that one of my fellow presenters are going to give you a good idea of where that has ended up for the university. The other thing that you would take a look at is that when you look at the total numbers for the number of individual course sections, you're seeing 23,000 some odd for individual course sections, but 9,000 of those are hybrid courses, or at this point what we're calling hybrid. That's the number that I expect to see flip. And then, we just completed a survey of the universities. We don't have a way at this point to capture the number of programs being offered through distance learning without doing an ad hoc survey. And so this was completed actually at the end of February. And we have 65 baccalaureate programs that have 51% or more of their courses available via distance learning, with 29 of them completely available, and 158 graduate programs, and as you see, 175 certificate programs. And so I want to make a point again that most of these programs are fully integrated with on-campus offerings. They're not standalone degrees offered only through distance learning. Here again is just another comparison by the universities of fundable semester credit hours and non-fundable semester credit hours. It's quite a few. I think you'll see that, I think Dr. Shalou will have some comments about the growth of Florida compared to other states, and I won't steal his thunder on that one. Then the last slide I have is really just to demonstrate the academic program offerings. And these are the programs that I had on a previous slide. Please take into account the fact that there is relative size difference between some of these institutions. But what you see here is that a lot of the numbers that make Florida so competitive within the region and actually nationally in the number of courses and programs that are offered are being driven by 3 or 4 institutions. And these are the 3 largest here are ones that made a very heavy commitment some 10 years or 15 years ago to start developing their capacity. And some of the others are just really more in catch-up mode, that they came on into the arena of distance learning at a little bit later date. And keep in mind, too, that Florida Gulf Coast actually proportionally has quite a few, quite a bit more capacity than is demonstrated here, just because of the relative size of the institutions. And Madam Chair, that ends my presentation.
Great. Are there any questions for Mr. Stevens? Obviously, you can see, whether we all realized it or not, we are in the business of e-learning. So if Dr. John Opper could come up, again, we'll have more conversation and dialogue as we keep going. But Dr. Opper is the Executive Director of the Florida Distance Learning Consortium. Prior to joining the consortium, he had 13 years of experience in post-secondary education policy, working for the Post-Secondary Education Planning Commission, where he authored policy studies and recommendations in the area of undergraduate education, academic libraries, funding policy, and educational technology. Dr. Opper has focused his interests in the area of technology and e-learning for the last 11 years with the consortium, and he has served 3 terms as the president of the Florida Association of Educational Data Systems. He is also active on the regional and national level with the Southern Regional Education Board, Educational Technology Cooperative, Electronic Campus, Distance Learning Policy Laboratory, and joint research projects with other regions' educational technology organizations. Dr. Opper, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here to share some of the information about the Distance Learning Consortium with you. The consortium has been around in one form or another since the late 90s. It started its life as the Florida Community College Distance Learning Consortium, was intimately involved with the Florida Virtual Campus. And then as we went through changes in governance across the state, we consolidated 2 entities who had similar roles and missions into one organization, the Florida Distance Learning Consortium, in 2003. The consortium is made up of all of your universities and all of the community colleges. They are the members of the consortium. They send representatives to the meetings of the consortium. The consortium meets 4 times a year. Those individuals are the people on the campuses who are heavily involved or assigned to manage the e-learning programs on those campuses. So we have a good group of expert people and individuals who are heavily involved in this activity. In 2009, the legislature formally established the Consortium Statute, and we serve as an advisory body to both the Board of Governors, the Division of Florida Colleges, and the State Board of Education in matters of educational technology and distance learning. The operating budget for the consortium is provided jointly by the State University System and the Division of Colleges. The consortium has 4 standing committees: Faculty and Instruction, Support Services, Strategic Partnerships and Licensing, and the Orange Grove Repository. Each of those committees has members of on it. They can select to be on any committee that they have specific interest or expertise on. Our faculty committee or instruction committee deals with issues around faculty training, quality in courses and instruction. Support and Services deals with our websites and our catalog. Partnerships and Licensing takes a lot of our time. We license collectively products and services that our institutions are interested in and go after volume discounts to save money. And our Orange Grove Repository, I'll talk in more detail about in just a few minutes. The catalog is one of the things that we have been assigned to do by the legislature, and we've had a catalog since the late 90s. Our course catalog lists over 24,000 courses last year. Students can come to the catalog and search for a course of interest by subject, delivery mode, institution. There are a variety of ways that they can do that. We also have an online degree program database that's searchable online, so students can come and search any or all of the 447 listings of online degree programs from certificate to the doctoral level. A standard description and graphic for the catalog has been provided to all institutions, and they locate that on their website so students can find it if they're looking for courses farther afield than their local institution. The average visitor to the catalog spends approximately 5 minutes on the site, views about 7 to 8 pages, and then when they find what they want, they typically transition directly to that university or college to enroll or investigate a course more completely. This is what the front page of the catalog looks like. It is www.distancelearn.org. That URL serves us well. It shows up pretty highly in Google searches, so we don't have to pay a lot of money to be found. It served us very well. When somebody does a search, they get a listing of courses that meet their criteria. You'll see on the left side is a link that gives them information about the course. On the right side is a link that gives them institution-specific information for enrollment or academic policies that they might need to know about. This is the kind of course detail page that they would see for this particular course at the University of West Florida. It gives some information about the tuition, so a general statement about what the course is about, how many credit hours. If they want to know about the institution's enrollment policies, they would go to the transition page. This is one for the University of Central Florida. And they have direct links on that page to specific information on the university's website so the student can find what they're looking for fairly quickly and get engaged with the institution to get enrolled in the course if that's what they decide to do. This is the degree search database. They can search by institution, by degree type, or by discipline, and they get the same type of listing that I showed you previously. This is what comes up, and they can click on a link about that degree program or go directly to the institution's website. So essentially the catalog is a tool that we use to provide access to students and help our institutions get information about their opportunities that they're offering to students across the entire state and across multi-states in addition to just Florida. One of the other heavy activities that we do is licensing, and we realized that early in the game that we were all buying a lot of the same things. And if we were all doing that, it didn't make any sense for us to do it individually. So where possible, we try to bring our institutions together around a common license for something or an agreement. Last year we were able to save $1.4 million over the licensing of learning management systems, software, resources, tutoring services, a variety of different kinds of things that institutions want to buy. Our Orange Grove Repository is a central, think of it as the Home Depot, like Home Depot is for building houses. This is the Home Depot for building courses and learning materials for students in courses. We also realized early in the game that one of the highest costs for our institutions is in development of courses. And since Florida has common course numbering, we were all developing resources for the same courses along the same criteria and the same learning objectives. So we've created the Orange Grove Repository as a way for institutions to share components of those courses, learning objects, simulations, materials, content. It's all in the Orange Grove and can be searched by course number in a variety of ways. So if you're trying to develop a course in mathematics, you can come to the Orange Grove and search on that course number or by that specific topic and see a range of things that people have contributed that might help you as a faculty member build your course out, improve your course, or help you find a resource that might help a student in your class that's having a problem. In addition to course material, we started to get into a few years ago the idea of open access textbooks. One of the other high costs for our students is the purchasing of textbooks. There are a range of open access textbooks. These are textbooks that are out in the world and freely useful and can be used by students and downloaded and used by faculty. We currently have 210 open access textbooks in the repository that faculty can use in their courses on mathematics, all types of activities that are up there. Faculty members are free to use the entire textbook, a portion of the textbook for their courses. They can take portions of other textbooks and combine them together to make their own textbooks. It's a way to really put the control of the resource in the hands of the faculty, and they can custom create the kinds of resources that they want for their courses. Because these are open access materials, students can download them at no cost. We also have a partnership with the University Press of Florida, Orange Grove Textbooks Plus, that allows a student to purchase a hard copy or a bound copy of that book that's been created at a reasonable cost. It's generally about 40% of what they would pay for a commercial textbook. So in a lot of ways, at these times when we're having to look at students and they're concerned about their budget and the cost of education, this is a way for us to do two things: empower the faculty to make the best resources they can and give something back to the students in the form of reduced cost for their coursework. In addition to that, one of the things that our members get out of the consortium that's one of those intangibles that they talk a lot about is the ability to get together 4 times a year around topics of interest. They share a lot of information. They talk to each other. They collaborate. A lot of the partnerships among our institutions are actually formed at these meetings. We distribute a monthly newsletter. We do webinars. There are evaluations at our meetings on emerging technologies. We have training that's done on a statewide basis around certain products of interest. And we do a lot of quick surveys. People want to know, well, what kind of fees are you charging for distance learning? Or what kinds of compensation are you providing to your faculty? We'll do quick surveys to help our members, our institutions, understand what the current practice might be and what some of the policy issues might be around this topic area. And with that, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
I do have one. To what degree are our faculty taking advantage of the Orange Grove Repository? I mean, is it a frequently used resource, or is there something we need to be thinking about differently on that point?
I don't think we track it that heavily. I will tell you that on the day that we were here at the board meeting some time ago and Chancellor Brogan announced the partnership with the Orange Grove Textbooks Plus and the repository, we essentially almost sunk the entire building in bandwidth. I mean, there were so many hits on that website on that particular day that we overreached the bandwidth on the servers. They were smoking. It's a little hard to know. We know sort of the traffic, but people can download things and use them repeatedly. They can link to them. So it's a little hard to know how they're using them right now. A faculty member can come and download the book and take it away and work with it. So it's a little inexact science, but we get a lot of information coming back to us about how useful it has been. And Susie Henderson, who's here with me, who manages that project, she gets a lot of calls to come to campuses and talk to faculty about that resource and about the Open Access Textbook Project. I will say that the Open Access Textbook side of this initiative has been lauded nationally. We've received 2 FIPSI grants on that project, and in many ways the Orange Grove, for that particular initiative, is considered a national leader in this effort.
Yes.
What is the budget for this particular program?
For the
budget,
consortium,
yeah.
the entire consortium, or the Orange Grove?
The Orange Grove.
The Orange Grove doesn't have a dedicated fund. We do it out of our hide right now.
And the whole program?
The whole program is, our budget for the whole consortium is $595,000 roughly.
And do you benefit in some way when universities offer these wonderful opportunities? How do you get funded? Who funds you?
We are funded by direct legislative appropriation, two parts, in the university side and the college side of their budget.
Any other questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If now Dr. Bruce Chalou could please come forward. We've got, he's come in to be with us today. He's the Director of Student Access Programs and Services at the Southern Regional Education Board in Atlanta, Georgia. In this role, he oversees the Academic Common Market, the Regional Contract Program for Health Professionals, Adult Learning, and Degree Completion Programs. He founded and continues to direct SREB's 16-state electronic campus initiative, and he also directs the Distance Learning Policy Laboratory, which addresses policy barriers in distance learning. Among his current activities, he serves on the board of directors of the Sloan Consortium, and he recently completed his second term as the president of Sloan C. He also serves on the Quality Matters Academic Advisory Council, on the editorial board of the American Journal of Distance Education, and as the co-director and a faculty member for the Penn State/Sloan C Institute for Emerging Leaders in Online Learning. Welcome. Thank you for coming here to join us today.
Thank you, Governor Duncan. Ladies and gentlemen, good to be with you. Always good to be in Florida. Great to be in Tallahassee, and love to be back on my home campus. But there's orange in my background too. So, I just want to make a couple of comments. I'm sensitive to my time and yours. It's good that we're having this discussion. You're having this discussion. But the reality is the train's left the station. Governor Duncan made a comment after Richard Stevens' remarks. This is happening. This is happening not only in this state, but around our region and literally around the country. The Sloan Consortium publishes an annual survey. Its 8th edition came out in November. Roughly 20 million students, higher education students in the United States, during the fall term of 2008, just under 6 million of those took at least one online course. So it's not as if this is kind of just slowly emerging. This is a fairly good-sized rumble cloud that is happening. And it's happening, growth in all sectors. My sectors, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, proprietary, urban, rural, suburban. It's happening at most campuses, and in fact, in that survey that Sloan C does, when you ask chief academic officers about the importance of this, it is up in the 80th percentile of chief academic officers are saying this is really important as a strategic part of our institution's activities. And why? Well, it is, from the student's perspective, convenience. It fits learning styles. I'm going to jump ahead of something I'll say later on. We are now coming to our higher education shores, students who have grown up with the technology. They use it. They're comfortable with it. They're probably more comfortable with it than some of us in the room are. And they've learned in this fashion. And their learning is much more active and far less passive than we have been accustomed to. They're tech savvy. They're not frightened by this. And they're probably more frightened by the fact that we're not using their technology to assist them in both their learning activities and the support structure. Richard referenced in his remarks this kind of 24/7 notion. A lot of that grew out of the e-learning or distance learning activities, and is now pretty common for students on our campuses, living in our dormitories, who want that same access to be able to get to the library, to be able to pay a parking ticket, to be able to change a course or do whatever they need to do online when it's convenient for them. And people are in a hurry. Students are in a hurry. Sometimes I wonder what they're in a hurry for. Life is not too bad on our campuses, but indeed they are. And certainly for adults, I'll spend a few minutes talking about the adult learners, those 25 and older, although we have probably some adults who are 18 and over, but that target audience of 25 and over, many of whom have started college and did not complete. They walked away from our campuses. There are 40 million working age adults now with some college credit and no degree. We're adding about 1 million a year, 25-year-olds every year to that. That's a market. We're spending a lot of time working on that. They're in a hurry. They, in fact, like to use online or e-learning to be able to balance life, work, and studies. So why is this a challenge all of a sudden? In part, I'll show you a slide momentarily here. We've kind of fallen off a cliff, and very rapidly, from being the premier provider of educational degrees in the industrialized world now to 12th. We have one state in the United States, I won't quiz you, I'll tell you what it is, it's Massachusetts, where its adult population, 25 and over, have an associate's degree or higher that's above 50%. So think about that for a moment. One state in the country, Massachusetts, population 25 and over with an associate's degree, not a baccalaureate, but an associate's degree or higher, has reached 50%, and they just did that 2 years ago. So we have a challenge, not only with our traditional age population, but our maturing, let's say that now, our maturing population as well. We've heard the president, it's been a long time since I've heard a sitting president speak about post-secondary education. The focus has been mostly on K-12. But he has raised this challenge. Major foundations, Alumni foundations, the Gates Foundation have all set targets of getting more people to degrees. We're spending and investing billions of dollars in federal and state monies to get people to credentials. We build campuses, we do online, we do all of these things, and yet our track record of getting students out with that credential is just not where it should be. And we're really leaving kind of millions, if you will, of young people with a collegiate experience, but again, without that credential. This is the graphic that I represented. I just would make one point. We still are kind of holding up well in terms of the overall degree population, but if you look very closely at the far right in the circle, the purple where the age generation 25 to 34 is lower than the age 35 to 44. For the first time in our history, or at least since we've started collecting this data, it has always been the case that the next generation, we did it. You can do it. Our kids do it, and our grandkids will do it. And we're seeing now this change, and this is significant, and this is troublesome for that initial working age population that is going in when we've reduced the number of degrees. So hopefully I can leave you with 3 or 4 points. That's certainly one of them. One of them is, as Governor Duncan said, you're working in this area. But one is we've got a gap. We've got a real challenge here with this immediate age group. I'll go through these very quickly. This kind of gives you a sense of where Florida ranks within the 50 states. The green arrows are your sister SREB states. You're one of 16. You can see it's amazing how that came out in garnet gold. Honestly, I did not. I didn't set that up. Honestly, I did. I would love to, but I didn't. I could get myself in a lot of trouble here with too many lovely colors. But let me use the maroon bar by Virginia Tech days. The maroon bar in the middle is the United States average, and so you get a sense of where Florida is on first time directly out of high school as a percentage of recent high school graduates. 2008 data below national average and kind of not where certainly you would want to be. This is this adult population, 25 to 64. Again, 2008 data, the national average, just under 30% with a bachelor's degree now. Remember, I gave you that statistic earlier with Massachusetts, which is associate or higher. And you can see Florida is down in the 26th percentile, much better than a number of the sister SREB states, but still below the national average. There have been this focus, this new accountability, if you will, on getting adults to degree completion, or everyone to degree completion, including adults. There was some analysis done by NCHEMS and some other groups, and some of you may have seen this in a little bit different format. We calculated that for us to get back to the lead in the OECD comparisons, that we need to have nationally across the country 4.2% more graduates from every state every year. So it's a compounded situation. to raise it 1 or 2 points is not easy. So to go up 4.2 in a state, that would be what we would take for all 50 states to do that. And you get a sense of where the states are. Florida is up in the roughly 5% range. So if you start to think about how could we, in fact, get to a point where we're producing 5% more graduates in our system on an annual basis, you get a sense of the magnitude of the problem for us to be able to, again, move up the OECD charts. So let me spend a few minutes talking about Florida in particular and the challenge in Florida. You're a growing state. You continue to grow. We can calculate growth in part because we can start counting heads in K, 1, 2, 3, 4, and up through. They're in the pipeline. We know they're in the pipeline, so we can start to project out. And even before we get into a situation of in-migration of families moving to the state, just in the pipeline already, your growth is significant, 22% by 2017. You've got continuing growth in your four-year public institutions. Your campuses, your branch campuses, and I'm going to show you in a moment your online programming as well. And you have a large, in fact, I probably would underscore that, a huge number of working age adults, some who are Floridians who left your institutions, others who have moved to the state, and they are adults without a credential. We believe they're a market. I'm going to spend a few minutes at the end. So you kind of got a perfect storm here. You've got all of these kind of population statistics kind of moving in a direction that will challenge you. And now online. And I mentioned to Governor Duncan before we started, as we were setting this up and we had a couple of engagements, conference calls and so forth, that was very enjoyable. I went up to our data people. Joe Marks is the data guru at SREB. And I said, I need some more information on Florida, Joe. And he shared this with me, and I looked at it, and I said, Joe, check this out. I mean, we have to be sure that this is really statistically correct. Now, what I can say is the data came from Florida. So it came from we got it from you. But this shows in the SREB states, in just four-year institutions, not the 2 years, just four-year institutions, the growth in full-time equivalent students. So you're a growth state. That's ways to catch Texas, but nevertheless, you're up about 5,740. Look at this chart. The growth, four-year institutions. So these are your public four-year institutions in Florida. Your growth is up 1.9. The actual rate, point change is 1.9, up 6. So we're trailing Texas. I shouldn't say we're trailing. I sound like a Floridian here. You're trailing Texas in terms of the overall magnitude of the post-secondary activity 4-year, but in terms of your online or e-learning activities, you are leading the region. And look at this. For the 2009-2010 year, by our calculation, the overall growth in the system came from online or technology-delivered instruction. Now, how do we get to that? Student credit hour increases 150,000, round figures. Your traditional on-campus grew by 26,500 student credit hours. Your traditional off-campus, those are your branch campuses and your academic centers, decreased by 27,300. And the difference that got you back to that increase of 150,000 came from 104,000 web-based, 22,300 site-to-site, usually technology from site to site, and 24,300 that's considered other, technology, correspondence, and what have you. So the growth in this state, in your four-year public institutions, can be attributed to online. As checked out by data services at SREB. So why? And let me just kind of quickly go through this. It's flexible. Richard made a comment during his remarks about how technology pervades our life. Try to do anything without technology. I am in complete agreement with him that these are tools that we need, that our young people need to function in the society. So why this wouldn't have an impact on how we deliver and provide higher education programming and services is a mystery to me. again, we're moving down very quickly down that train track. Time, location, length, delivery formats, learner style. I think this state and others, institutions, UCF and UWF, you're going to hear from both of them, are really not only state leaders but regional and national leaders in how they've integrated technology into their programming. And you should be quite proud of their efforts. And the numbers, in fact, that Richard put up would demonstrate that. It is really preparing the next cadre of young people for the world of work. And we're now getting into reaching these new markets. And I realize you've got a lot of, you're filled up, but there are other markets to serve, and we think that online can, in fact, be one of the ways that you can serve them. Let me spend just a couple of minutes, and my time is running out here, on some policy issues or considerations that I think you might want to have on your agenda as your discussions continue. There's this competitiveness and this degree gap that I think I spoke to earlier, and the challenges of us getting increases in degrees awarded over the next several years. We've got this changing demographic picture, and we've got really new opportunities, and I would say increasing pressures on online learning to be part of the solution to that. We think it is, but I think we will be all be doing more in that area. As we travel about the SREB states, the word that I keep hearing is accountability. If you want to debate the definition of e-learning, distance learning, or what have you, try debating the term accountability. It gets defined in a lot of different ways in a lot of different states. But there is a reality here that there's a lot of pressure on us to do a much better job of bringing not only students into our institutions, but getting them through to degree completion. And as I mentioned earlier, we're adding about 1 million students, 25-year-olds a year nationally. A large chunk of that population of almost 50 million now, moving towards 50 million, are in the SREB states. And so we, SREB, have taken that on as a challenge that we, in fact, need to meet. Other challenges, the for-profit sector. We do not have specific state data for Florida on what the for-profit institutions are doing in the state online. I can tell you that nationally, their growth curve is skyrocketing. It continues to skyrocket. For the 25 and older group that is of some focus with some of the SREB efforts, 2 years ago, 2008, they were growing at about 75%. And so their market share, if you will, that's a term we use, but it's probably stealing a term from them, is, I think, pretty significant. Tuition and pricing. There seems to be a pretty clear indication from the work that we're doing in our SREB states that tuition and fees are going to continue to go up. So that's not a surprise. But we are seeing some interesting strategies starting to play out with respect to e-learning or online learning. One is this notion of, and I think Richard did a nice job of saying there could be some offsets here of not using space on a campus or using classroom space. But we are now starting to see institutions build into their tuition what I label a convenience fee. You're probably not going to see it listed as a convenience fee, but the notion that you can receive the benefits of a post-secondary education from an institution, and rather than discounting that, we're going to charge you more because we're delivering that service to you. And fees, technology fees, distance learning fees, and the like. Several institutions are looking at this as a revenue replacement as well for their on-campus students. Market pricing. I got a call 9 or 10 months ago from someone in the state saying we've got an issue with market pricing. What do you know about market pricing? So we hit the literature and found very little on market pricing. But it's essentially the notion that an institution for its online programming would charge a rate that it believes it can charge for a program in a specific market segment. I know you've had some movement in that area. I think we're going to see more and more of this market pricing. Now, how it should be constrained, what the policy construct should be, we're going to be listening to you because we know that that is still part of your agenda. But it's clear that we're moving in that direction as well. Quality. We haven't talked about quality yet, but when I'm out talking about online learning, the first thing I hear about is it as good as what we do on the campus? I'd argue, and you're going to hear from Joel in a few moments on UCF, I think it's better than what they're doing in their traditional classrooms. Ask the faculty who use it, ask the students who participate in it. Go to a place like Central Florida, go to a place like Virginia Tech where the focus is not on the technology, it is on integrating the uses of the technology for the faculty to create better teaching and learning environments. And it doesn't matter whether you're delivering that to a student who's in a dormitory across the Greenway at Virginia Tech, or delivering it, or Landis Green, or delivering it halfway across the country. The technology, in fact, can allow you to create marvelous learning environments, and the key to that is getting your faculty engaged and fully using that. We have more data on online learning than we know what to do with. In fact, I think we probably collect too much of it. And part of it is somewhat of a response to, well, show us that you are just as good. I'd argue that we can show you more about online than we can probably show you about what goes on in your traditional classrooms. We know when students visit, how often they visit, what they do when they visit, what interactions they have with themselves and faculty members. We collect all of this data because of the rich tools and portals that we have to be able to do that. So I would say, in terms of quality, we need to start to move the discussion. We need to refocus it to outcomes. If we really want to measure something, let's measure on outcomes. Most of us probably feel comfortable going to nurses. I try to avoid them, but if you have to see one, there's something that we know about them. They're licensed. We're less concerned about where they got their training and knowing that they are licensed within a state. We don't do that we do it in medicine, we do it in some legal areas, but we don't do it across a broader spectrum. I think we're going to see more and more with respect to quality and outcomes moving to these outcome space. Time to degree. We are stuck in this model of 15 semester hours, 2 semesters, 4 years, you get a degree. And then you look at the data and say, nobody's graduating. It's 5.1 or 4.2 or 4.8. We are so tied to the term and the time. We need to get away from that. Now, that's radical. I realize that. But we need to let people learn at the pace that they can learn. I could use all kinds of great analogies, such as, why should I begin an intro Spanish course? Oh, I would need to do that, actually, when in fact I'm a native speaker. So it's not that we can't do it, it's just that we tend not to do it. And we need to address this. I use the seat-in-the-seat model. I would argue that some folks believe we're measuring the wrong end there. But let me finish up. Kind of a policy potpourri, if you will. Outsourcing. We had a little discussion just before the session began with institutions that are contracting with entities or organizations to deliver programming. They're using market pricing. And there are some questions, there may be some questions in my mind about where we draw that line between academic outsourcing of the institution ultimately to the corporate entity that's providing it. A lot of new competitors in the marketplace. Proprietary institutions are not going to go away, despite a lot of efforts at the federal level, I think, to deal with them. International institutions, they see a market. There's a market here in the U.S. for international programming, and there are some countries that are doing a much better job of marketing their activities. I'm going to finish up with some state regulatory issues here. Prior learning assessment, outcomes-based degrees, I think I mentioned that earlier. SREB, 2 more minutes. Mantra is degrees. Report, no time to waste. If you haven't seen it, we need to be sure that we get copies of it for you, with 50 recommendations to institutions and states on getting students to degree completion. 3 tacks. We need to do a better job of preparing our young people for college or work. So a challenge to the K-12 community. Number 2, once we get you in college, keep you there. We need to do a better job of wrapping ourselves around the students who come to our campuses. Thirdly, if we miss those 2, then let's be sure that we have programs and services available to them as adult learners, as working adults, as family members to be able to pursue studies. Federal regs, finish up with this. You've heard both Richard and John comment on SREB, the Electronic Campus, the Policy Lab. You reach out to good people and you help them, you have them help you build things, and the state of Florida and those two individuals in particular have done that. When we launched the Electronic Campus 13 years ago, the idea was, let's create a free trade zone. Let's allow a Florida institution to deliver programming to Virginia and not to have to go through the regulatory requirements of Virginia. And I used to be the regulator in Virginia, and I can tell you that those took time and energy. That was the agreement. We've lived by that agreement for the past 13 years. New federal regulations effective July 1 say, no, Florida, if you deliver to Virginia, you need to be approved in Virginia. The regs said, we will support reciprocal agreements. We believe we've got a 16-state reciprocal agreement. We've sent it to the feds, and the feds have said, we'll look at it, but we can't respond to it because there are lawsuits pending. So we're kind of stuck in neutral, if you will, and we're trying to get ourselves back on track, if you will. So we're going to be working with our states over the next several months to try to deal with that. Now, not only is it a problem for institutions that want to come into Florida, it's a problem for every one of the institutions here who want to deliver programming to a single student. That's all it's going to take. To a single student who's in another state, you've got to seek approval. And hopefully this feed is not going to Tennessee. I would give you one example. For a single student, for an institution delivering a program to Tennessee, would run you, just on the application fee alone, $25,000 to $30,000 per institution. And that's before you do the work of putting the materials together. So we're working hard at that, and I would ask you to stay tuned. So let me stop there.
You did
It's
very
pretty
well.
close,
Yeah,
pretty close.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for?
I had a question.
Yes.
How do the different ranking services handle online distance learning, and does it make it easier or harder for an institution to move up in those rankings, because, when you take into account this?
I think for the first time a year ago, I started to see a ranking of online institutions, or institutions that had a heavy orientation to online. And most of those rankings that came out had proprietary institutions, kind of 1 through 8. And in part because the only measure they were really using was, what is the size of your enrollment? What is the impact that you're having in terms of enrollments? We have not gotten to the level of ranking institutions in terms of the quality or the breadth of their activities, and not just on enrollment. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't think U.S. News and World Report, who's been the purveyor of much of this, has had a particular focus on those kinds of institutions. We think they have started to move in that direction, but so what I would say is, if you see any ranking, I would be very careful about the rankings, particularly for the online institutions, because I don't think they're based upon any creditable evidence or information about the qualitative aspects of what that institution is doing online. I don't think UCF was on that list, Joel. And I would say to you, and I would say this if I were standing in any one of our other states, if you asked me to put a list of top 10 online institutions that have adopted or embraced online and technology, Central Florida would be on that list. They are truly not only a state, but a national leader. So I discount it, is what I would say.
Chair Parker?
Sorry, looking at that.
I'm not sure I answered your question.
I guess I was just following up with Governor Colson. It seems that the U.S. News and World Report and those groups, they just haven't started considering this whole issue yet, because it wasn't so much, I guess, ranking of independent, or I guess independent rankings of institutions that have online programming, as much as whether traditional ranking systems have included or provided an opinion about whether having X number of these programs would impact the ranking of the institution.
Right. Okay, and I misunderstood the question. Okay. I apologize. I do not believe that the online activities would impact in any even minimal way what an institution's ranking otherwise would be. I think they're clearly focused on a set of variables that are oriented to their campus activities, and they're probably not really looking very much at the online. So I don't think it would have any appreciable, if any, impact.
And Dr. Barron,
President
please.
Barron?
I was just going to say that if your rankings are on a student basis are your incoming fall characteristics of your degree students, then you might not see those students represented in the pool at all, especially if it's one course or another. If an institution is reporting its full financial resources and these students are all paying, then it would end up in the financial resource category that each institution is reporting, and financial resources is a major factor in the U.S. News and World Report ranking. So I don't think there would be anything direct there because of the way we're doing the student quality, but it would show up in the resource side.
I had another question.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. I know you talked a little bit about the quality, and you said that professors thought that that their students were doing better, say, than they would if they were actually in class. If I'm paraphrasing what I thought I heard you say, and I guess how is that, based upon what?
Can I suggest, listen to the UCF presentation before we answer that question, because they're going to delve into that one a lot too. But but go ahead. I mean, just that's a big part of their whole. We spent hours arguing about how could that be early on in the planning.
I would just make one quick comment. I think Joel's presentation will, in fact, support this, that if we engage our faculty early on in the uses of these technologies to create better learning environments, the experience I had at Virginia Tech was faculty took it and they ran with it. And we were not concerned about delivering a program from Blacksburg to Richmond. We were concerned about delivering a program from one side of the campus to wherever that student might be sitting. And so there was a richness that was created. There was an interaction amongst students and faculty that we would not see in a traditional classroom setting. So that really was the basis of my comment. And again, as Governor Duncan said, I think you're going to hear that story told in much greater volume and better volume, if you will, when you hear Joel's presentation.
Yes, sir. Yes.
This is my last question. I'm sorry, Governor.
No.
Governor Duncan. Is there anything or any systems in place that suggest that if there's some pattern or some showing that some type of e-learning mechanism is not good for a particular student, have you found that there's something in place that triggers that so a student can't continue to use that as a mechanism? If I'm clear.
There have been any number of very good, I think quite successful efforts at monitoring students in their e-experiences, particularly those who don't come to campus. If we have them in a blended format, we have a little bit better opportunity to manage that. But if it's totally online, there are some mechanisms that are in place that essentially are watching what the student's doing. We've got data that suggests that if a student registers for a course and he or she does not engage within the first 2 weeks of that course, they're probably lost. They're probably gone. So we try to promote get early engagement, and don't leave it on the part of the student. Get the faculty member to reach out, or whoever the faculty member might be working with, to make that engagement. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
No.
No? Not
Yes.
quite. Thanks.
Yes. There you go.
You talked about it being easy to collect data with online learning. Are there any surveys that you conduct that might kind of indicate comparisons between in the classroom, outside the classroom, maybe why a student might be taking the online course just in general? Are there any surveys done to do comparison analysis and to really kind of delve into the reasons behind it?
Yeah, I think we could provide you in fairly short order with some data on why students move to online, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. What I can't do is to do some small studies, but nothing big, comparative analyses of what happens in an online course versus what happens in a traditional classroom course. There have been some experimental efforts that have been taken with students in two groups, an online course versus a traditional course, and most of those come back with no significant difference. And that was the mantra for many of us who were out promoting online for a while, and I said, let's put that away because I just think it's better. But you've challenged me to provide some information and data, and I think we can do that. I think we can show that, and you're going to hear some more about that from you, Steve.
And then also, as a follow-up, is there a difference between, of course, taking an English course more than a chemistry or biology, STEM type of course in the classroom when it comes to these surveys and analysis as well?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency for institutions to shy away from particularly the lab science courses and some other courses. I mean, I'm not going to argue that every course can be done as effectively online. I would say that every course can be done online. And I think there are some marvelous tools that are now available for virtual laboratories that are probably safer and, from an educational standpoint, just as good as you would have in a laboratory. That said, I think I'd still want my nurses and medical people to get into that clinical setting. But it is amazing. If you look at a really good online course, you would be simply amazed at the quality of that course and what you can in fact do with the course. And that, to me, that's the most exciting part of this, because we've got faculty who are just taking this to bounds that most of us who were starting in this business didn't think we would get to. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I think you're still going to be around for us for dialogue. Okay, so next we've got two of our rock stars of e-learning in our system that are going to talk to us. But I know I saw Kathleen Moore out there from USF. Do we have any other distance learning people from the institutions here? Can you at least just raise your hand? Let us thank you. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate all of your participation, and I know we're going to continue this dialogue and look forward to hearing from everyone.